Welcome to the Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we delve into the art of intimacy for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. I'm your co-host, Dr. Tom Murray, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and the author of the book that started it all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Robbins, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. My background includes a master's degrees in nursing and international health, along with a doctorate in business administration. We're here to explore the world of intimacy in a way that resonates with even the most structured and detailed-oriented individuals.
In Making Nice with Naughty, we uncover the secrets to navigating intimacy for those who thrive on rules, order, and perfectionism.
Join us as we discuss practical insights, expert advice, and personal stories that will guide you through the journey of connecting intimately while staying true to your organized and rule-following nature.
Whether you color within the lines or prefer a perfectly outlined plan for everything, we've got you covered.
So buckle up and get ready to explore the fascinating world of intimacy. With us, Making Nice with Naughty is not just a podcast. It's your guide to a fulfilling and organized love life.
This is Making Nice with Naughty. Let's dive in. We're back at Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we go through my book, Making Nice with Naughty, and diving deep into the overcontrolled temperament and its role in our sexual lives.
You make it sound so easy, Tom. I'm so excited to be here today. So I really appreciate this time that I get to spend with you, Tom, and just kind of walking through your book and talking about the different things that you're willing to share with people. And last week, we spoke about vulnerability, and we talked about sexual confidence, and really, you gave us an opportunity to dive deep into that overcontrolled mind and see what is happening between the ears, so to speak, and to just really see the stage, so setting the stage of why there's so much frustration and why things don't always turn out as planned, or probably more often do not turn out as planned. And I'm particularly excited about today's episode because we're going to talk about the ego. And if any of you out there listening or watching this have the book, you just need to open it up. The title of the chapter is Let Go of the Ego, right? And I wanted to, I love that. You even talk about the commercial, Let Go of My Ego.
Right, that's right.
I so grew up with that commercial. So the little kids fighting over the waffle, but let go of my ego. And I wanted to ask you, as I was reading in your book, and you were talking about, you introduce the Buddhist philosophy or psychology of the notion of ego. Would you mind spending some time kind of just bringing people up to par, helping them understand what that means? And there may be a whole group of folks who totally get it. For me, this was a very, very difficult concept to grasp.
Yeah, for sure. So most people, when they've heard the term ego, they heard it in the context of Freudian psychology. Freud, one of the basic uh, uh, structures of the mind that he had theorized was that there was the ego, the id, and the superego. And Freud's definition of the ego is different than the Buddhist definition of the ego. From the Buddhist perspective, the ego is the conditioned self, right? The conditioned self, uh, the part of the self that has been influenced by external forces over time to create the narrative of me, my, mine. So this who is the story of self, and that story is cultivated over time through our relationships with others, and does not represent the true self, or the true you. The you that is observing the thought. So there is the observer, and there is the actual thoughts that are being observed. And when one thinks that who they are is the mind chatter that they're having, then that's where a lot of problems can emerge, because they think that if my mind says it's true, then it must be true. When in fact, the truth, big T truth, is the you that is observing your experience rather than your experience.
That was really hard for me to understand. Thank you for explaining that. I, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, certainly I've been taught that psychoanalytic theory,
Yeah.
right? And it's ingrained in it's so ingrained that I lose track that it's a theory,
Mm.
right? It's you get that assumption that what's the truth. It is. When you talked about, you said the story of self, the story of self. Would you even say that that could even be one's paradigm, how they see things? Or is it this dialogue that you have in your head of where you're kind of talking to yourself about events and such? Is that more of what it is?
It's if I'm following you right, it's somewhat of both, right? So the frame through which I see the world is in
Mm-hmm.
part created through my conditioning, right?
Okay.
And that conditioning informs the story I tell myself about my life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
My life experiences,
Mm-hmm.
right? And uh, uh, for example, uh, optimism and pessimism are lenses through which one experiences the world. Martin Seligman found that we are most inclined to adopt the worldview of our mothers. So if our mothers were more optimistic, we tend to be more optimistic. If our mothers were more pessimistic, we tend to be pessimistic. So that is a part of the conditioning that
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm referring to when I talk about the ego.
When I as so in my practice, my clinical practice, when I have someone that comes in and they're seeking help for anxiety,
Yeah.
I can pretty much tell without them having to go through a lot of detail that they have more often than not have grown up in chaos.
Mm.
They grew up with uncertainty. They were seeking some sort of control. They work very hard at predicting things. They run narratives through their head to make sure that they do the right thing, something, making sure that whatever their action is meets the expectation of the person around them and such. And anyway, it manifests itself as an anxiety disorder where the anxiety is preventing them to move forward. And and if I'm kind of connecting with what you're talking about, is that would really be that internal dialogue is self. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right. Or ego.
Or ego? Okay. Okay. So it's ego. And then
In the dialogue, the internal dialogue,
mhm,
when it comes to anxiety, the
mhm,
internal dialogue is usually about the future.
always always about the future.
Right, right. Whereas if someone is chronically depressed, the internal dialogue is usually about the past.
Correct. Correct. It's
The
a
thing
it's
that
interesting.
the thing that I would somewhat maybe modify what you described is, it's was their childhood chaotic, or was it that they were hypersensitive to to disorder, and in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
the lens
Mm-hmm.
that they had viewing the
Mm-hmm.
world exaggerated the chaos, right?
Or
So
it's all about perception.
exactly, that's
It's
my
their
point. It's
perception
right. And
of that
so
event. Mm-hmm.
um the the ego is always grasping, right? Always wanting reality to be different than it is, right? So always wanting reality to be different than it is, and then judging reality for not being what they believe it should, must, or has to be. And so that is what creates the suffering. And suffering has many flavors. It is the Baskin Robbins. And so suffering can come in the form of anxiety, or it can come in the
Mm-hmm.
form of depression. So there, or many other forms of suffering. So the flavors of suffering, though, is only possible because of the ego. You can only have suffering in the presence of the ego. Without the ego, there is no suffering. There may be pain, but suffering is the story we tell ourselves about the pain.
Okay. Okay. So then ego's not necessarily the enemy.
Right.
I
It's a
mean,
natural byproduct of our conditioning.
and it's
In other words, the ego is in essence a reflection of our conditioning. If you want to know, or said differently, a personality
mm-hmm.
is the sum of all of your best attempts to survive childhood, right? And so
Yes, that's
that
very
whatever,
true.
yeah, whatever your ego is, or slash personality is, that is due to your conditioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one is born with a personality. As much as people want to think that, we're not born with a personality. We acquire a personality from our life experiences, and we adopt personality traits that are most likely to help us to survive childhood.
I was just going to say we're survivalists,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And 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 it's all based off of our perception.
Hmm.
You can have the same family dynamics, but your children could have different perceptions of that family dynamic.
Yes. And in part, no child, no two children in the same family have the same set of parents, right? That I it was a different parent to my firstborn than to my secondborn.
That
My
is so true,
secondborn did not
John.
have the same parents that his brother had.
That is so true. My parents, so my brother is 10 years older than I am. And there's no siblings between us. So it's my brother, 10 years, Francis. And my parents were quite old in their generation to have children.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't have nearly the rules that my brother went through, right? They were just exhausted. It wasn't important anymore. Stay out of the road, be home before dark. That was about the boundaries. But I can see that. I can see that. And it's so interesting that you would say that because as parents we're constantly evolving.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Even
Right.
economically we could be in a different situation, which
Oh,
has tremendous change and impact on how we raise our children.
right. Right. Sometimes, people have asked me over the years,
Mm-hmm.
what was the most influential, or what contributed most to my success as a therapist? And I tell people that I came into this profession having had 18 years of apprenticeship, also known as childhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
that I survived my childhood, and part of surviving my childhood meant was having cultivated the ability to pay attention to psychological phenomenon within my family, within my parents,
Mhm.
etc. And that, you know, uh, fortunately, has allowed me to then enter a profession that capitalizes on that training.
I just think that's so mind blowing what you're talking about. That how we survive childhood prepares us for where we are as an adult, and that even situations that one may look on and say as an outsider, oh, that poor kid is growing up in this XYZ environment, that is not necessarily what the outcome of that child is going to be. Like it's certainly we want to make sure children are safe and all those good things happen to them, but it's interesting to think about how different situations can just bring out different outcomes with as an adult. I know I'm
Yeah.
kind of rambling over here, but it all really goes down to the ego, the ego, and
What is the story that our mind is going to tell us
mhm,
about our experience, and are we going to believe the story? Are we going to identify or fuse with the story? Or said differently,
mhm,
who would you be without your story? Who would you be
mm,
without the story, I must be perfect sexually?
mhm,
Who would you be without the story, I must be, I must have a perfect body, right?
mhm,
The ego um, is constantly interested in its own relevance.
mhm.
And one of the way that it stays relevant is by creating drama. Without the drama, whether it's intrapsychic between the ears or interpersonal between you and
Mhm.
other people, it struggles, right? It struggles to exist. In fact, the ego cannot exist when you're fully present. When you're fully in the present moment, there is
Mhm.
no ego. You know, if you're walking in nature, nature is a wonderful experience for a lot of people because it pulls them in the presence. And when they're
Yes,
fully in the present moment, they don't have mind chatter.
that's very true.
And in the absence of the mind chatter, that is your, that's when you are uh, 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 yourself,
Mhm.
right? You're with a capital S. Um, and it's only when our experience then becomes contaminated by mind chatter that
Mhm.
we get swept away into the drama, whatever flavor it is.
What would you say thinking about the chatter, thinking about mindset. When I was reading in the book, reading about mindset, there was the fixed mindset, there's the fatalistic mindset, and then there's that flexible mindset. Is it Can you have more than one mindset?
Well, many overcontrolled people will vacillate between the fixed and the fatalistic, but there tends to be a predominant one that
Hmm.
shows up when they're stressed.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but it's true that one can vacillate between more than one, for sure.
As far as the fixed mindset goes, it sounds like to me kind of what you have it's titled the fixed mindset, where they're just really stuck and super rigid. Is that correct?
Yeah, and very goal oriented. So it's like no matter what obstacles in front of me, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
still pursue the goal. I'm going to ignore. In the last episode, we talked
Oh.
about low flexible control where they're resisting feedback. Well, in the fixed mindset, they tend to really resist that feedback that
Mm-hmm.
maybe I need to modify my plans here, but instead they double down on their plans
And it's to their own detriment.
to their own detriment. Yeah. So the example that I believe I give in the book is the captain of the Titanic, where the captain hits the iceberg
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Screw it, still straight to New York." Even though we're taking on water, even though we're sinking,
Mm-hmm.
we're still going to head to New York. And that really is the embodiment of that kind of fixed mindset that the goal, no matter what, is takes precedent over any kind of feedback that is coming in.
Wow. Wow. And then the fatalistic mindset,
So that
doom and
fatalistic
gloom, just doom.
doom, that's right, doom and gloom. I'm so overwhelmed by the feedback that I'm going to shut down. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to retreat. So again, in that, using the
Mm.
Titanic metaphor, it would be the captain being told we've hit an iceberg, and the captain just goes to his quarters and hunkers down into the corner and just waits it out. Uh,
Mm.
and so if we look at this from a sexual perspective, it would
Mm-hmm.
be that example of that person having sex even though it's painful
Mm-hmm.
and just bearing it.
Mm.
Just I'll
Mm.
just get through this. I'll just do what I know is already uncomfortable, and I'll just you know no matter what. uh for the
Mm.
fatalistic mindset, it's that person who's so afraid that they're not going to get an erection that they don't even pursue their partner sexually because they don't want to risk that having a failure again,
Because it will be a failure.
because it will be. Yeah.
The fixed mindset, when you were talking about that, to me, Tom, that just seems like that would lead to resentment. So
Mm,
much anger and resentment
right.
that that
Yeah.
I'm doing this even though I'm having all these problems, even though, and look at you not, doing it and doing anything, or you're failing in your role, and I'm doing it
Yeah.
despite having all this obstacles. I think there'd be a lot of resentment.
Certainly can be, especially if you add in the tendency towards moral superiority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
uh, uh, People with the fixed mindset can have high expectations. And what
Mm-hmm.
we know is that expectations is resentment under construction.
Resentment
So the
under
more
construction. Mm-hmm.
So the more
Mm.
you're fixated on the expectations, and when we have expectations psychologically, we have already assumed that the expectation has been met, and then when reality comes to meet us and
Mm.
sees that, oh, the expectation hasn't been met,
Mm.
then that's what resentment
Yeah.
that fuels
Yeah.
the resentment.
Yeah. Oh, that is just a common theme when you in session, it's not uncommon that people are talking, especially during that intake session or as they get to becoming more comfortable around. Uh, it's not uncommon for my clients to start talking about different events that happen, and you can just it just drips with resentment, just
Yeah.
drips with resentment, and it has so much to do with having a fixed mindset.
And a
Mm.
lot of people who have resentment
Mm-hmm.
also have a sense of entitlement,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That they were entitled to
Mm-hmm.
reality being different than what it is. And of course, entitlement is that sense of entitlement, as well as resentment, is 100% egoic, or ego, born out of
Right.
the ego,
Yes.
right? That again, the story of me, my mind, that I should have had it a different way. That my life should have been different than it was. I should have gotten this, that, or the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And any time the ego argues with reality, there's suffering. If there's suffering, there's an argument with reality. You cannot have suffering without the argument with reality. Reality being the isness of the present moment, right?
Right.
If I stub my toe, I shouldn't have stubbed my toe, right? That's the argument with reality. Of course you
Mm.
should have. How do I know? Because you did. That's reality. The reality is you did stub your toe. That's how I know you should have. But as soon as you tell yourself you shouldn't have done something that clearly you
Mm-hmm.
did, you
Mm-hmm.
suffer.
What I hear so many times, I hear is, it was my fault. I'm stupid. It was my fault. I shouldn't have done it.
Mhm. Well, it could have been your fault, but you should have done it. That's the irony, right?
Because
And
that's
how do I know you
reality.
should have done it? Because you
Because you
did do it.
did. Because
Yeah,
you did.
right. And people think that should is a moralistic term, when should is actually a predictive term. So sometimes I illustrate this um, using a book,
Okay.
right? And I'll have a book here, and our YouTube viewers will be able to see this, whereas our listeners, I'll have to describe it. So I'll take a book, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll open half of it, and I'll stick a pen inside the book, and I'll close the top of it.
Okay.
And so now the pen is hidden from the viewer, and I'll say, should the pen be in the book? And the client will sometimes will say, well, no, the pen shouldn't be there. And I like, well, but what is reality? Oh, the pen is there. Yeah. So if I open the book and you see the
Mm-hmm.
pen, that would seem right to you. But if I put the pen there and then open the book and the pen wasn't there, you would be like, wait, that's weird. What happened? Well, because the pen should be there because it is there. It should be there because it is there. It is not an argument with reality. And whenever you argue with reality,
Mm-hmm.
you lose, but only 100% of the time. And so that fixed
It's,
mindset and the
yes.
fatalistic mindset is
Mm-hmm.
really about arguing with reality. The fixed mindset is arguing with reality, as in ignoring the feedback of the water coming onto the ship, whether
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
Titanic. Or the fatalistic mindset is arguing with reality in the sense of, you know what, we still have people dying. We still have to come up with alternatives. We still have to get
Mm-hmm.
women and children onto boats, and oh yes, and with wealthy men, we have to get them onto the boats. uh, Versus the third one, which is the flexible mindset.
Right. Right.
And that flexible mindset is the best of the fixed and the fatalistic. The flexible mindset says, okay, yes, water is coming onto the ship,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not going to New York tonight.
Right.
That's not happening tonight. And instead, our priority is to get as many people as possible onto the lifeboats.
And I think about that in the context of a sexual relationship. So if for some reason or another, I'm the male, I'm not able to have an erection, then it's not like, oh, it's over. It means we're gonna do more things. We're gonna explore this other thing. Maybe we just cuddle. Maybe we're going to just spend some time together without the pressure or the expectation of that physical intercourse.
Right. So I give an example of a flexible mindset is I may not get an erection, uh, but I can wear a strap on dildo and we can still have fun using a strap on dildo. But then it comes up against what the ego says. Oh, the ego comes in. That's emasculating. That's embarrassing. That's shameful, right? Or the partner might be like, well, that's not a real penis. I'm not going to do that. And so you can see
Yeah,
how
yeah.
that fatalistic fixed mindset begins to reemerge. Whereas if you have a pleasure based view of sex,
Mm-hmm.
then it's whatever we do, we're two consenting adults. We can do what we want to do
Correct.
as long as we're having a
Correct.
good time and enjoying each other.
Correct. I think the consenting is the big piece, right? And the adult piece. The whole strap on. I had to conceptualize that. The first time was just, it's not something I have in my sex toys chest
Yet.
yet. And when I was trying to conceptualize that whole, I think you were talking to me, we were talking offline, and you had said something about that. And I kept thinking, wouldn't it get in the way? Wouldn't it get in
Of
the
what?
way
Of
of,
what?
of the erection? Because in my mind, I saw it as, first of all, I've never seen one. So I'm kind of making this up in my head. I've certainly seen dildos, but I'm assuming they have straps.
Hence, strap on.
And strap on or clips or something. They wrap around you. They have a tie. But I just kept thinking that if a man was wearing it,
Mm-hmm.
and they had, and in my head, right, they have an erection, wouldn't it be in the way?
Oh, if
And
they have an erection, then they would use their erection. This assumes they don't have an erection.
well, so I was having a family conversation out of the sake of not embarrassing my family members, which I've already, brought up Judy a couple times in past episodes. The consensus of opinion around the dinner table was that the female was wearing the strap on.
Oh, well, that would be pegging.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
Of which I was really, I get that, but like that was not even in my mind. And the person who said that was a little on the old side. You know what I mean? Mama knew more about it. So the answer around the dinner table was, because I was like, explain this to me. How would not a strap on get in the way of sex? And the answer was, well, not if the female's wearing it.
Right.
And so which I hadn't even thought of. And you hadn't either, because that wasn't part of what you were thinking. You were thinking the guy is wearing it because he doesn't have an erection.
That's right. That's right.
As just like a prosthetic.
That's right.
For my medical brain.
That's right.
So a strap on is a prosthetic penis.
That's
sounds
right.
more that sounds more cultured.
But keep in mind, what is its purpose? Is for pleasure. So for a lot of and I'm very sensitive to the fact that we're using a lot of heteronormative language here, and certainly
that's correct. That is correct.
A gay couple can, if they're experiencing if they're experiencing erectile problems, this certainly still applies. But that the idea is that if someone has anxiety-induced erectile disappointment or dysfunction, and they're wanting to still they have a receptive partner, literally and figuratively, they can use a strap-on dildo as a way to bring pleasure to the other person. And for the person wearing the strap-on, they can derive pleasure in seeing the person experience pleasure.
I see. I see. That I really appreciate you bringing that up as well, because I think it is important for all of our listeners and viewers to know that any of the various relationships that are possible is what brings you pleasure.
You're right.
And there's no preconceived one way or the other. I am attracted to men. I'm particularly attracted to one particular man. So that's my worldview.
Well, Keith
That's
is really
mine.
attractive. Let's be honest.
He is a cutie. He is a cutie. He is. So I what but it's interesting though. So the the fact of engaging in this this experience, engaging in this with another person, and and you're able to seek pleasure in knowing that they are enjoying themselves.
Hmm.
That has to be just that to me seems so selfless, right? And almost the highest expression of love or highest expression of intimacy, in that what I'm going to do is going to um, bring this pleasure to my partner, and in so doing will bring me pleasure.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I think that's like the ultimate. I do.
Yeah. And this is somewhat on a different topic, or quite a bit on a different topic, but those who are in polyamorous relationships,
Mm-hmm.
one of the core principles of polyamory is this concept of compersion. And that's basically the definition of compersion is that ability to take pleasure in knowing your partner's having a good time, even if it means with someone else, that you're excited for your partner because they're excited. You're excited for your partner because they're enjoying themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
don't see it as a threat to yourself because they can experience
Mm-hmm.
joy, but rather you are delighted that they can experience
Yeah.
joy.
Yeah.
I think I talk about this in the book. Love comes from the Old English word lief, Lief, which then mutated over time to the word leave, Leave, as in I give you leave. I give
Hmm.
you leave to go as you are, right? Which then
Mm-hmm.
turned into the word love. So in essence, love is the acceptance of the other as they are and as they wish to be, not as you wish them to be, right? To
Hmm.
love somebody as you wish them to be is really an agenda. To
Right.
love
Right.
someone as they wish themselves to be, that's that's profound.
That is profound.
Hello there, dear readers. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Naughty. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now.
Well, let's reel it back in to the
Yes,
book.
let's.
I want so continuing on this little journey in this chapter and talking about we've already talked some about mind chatter, that just that noise.
Mm,
You talk about heavy and light chatter.
mm,
Heavy and light chatter. And the one of the things that I thought, well, that's a pretty bold statement, is that when you have a true thought, it's always light.
always,
Always light. And
always.
when and so then by process of elimination, a heavy thought is correlated more with stress and is kind of a is could be a false thought.
No, I wouldn't even say could be.
It is a false thought.
It is a not true thought.
So when I I want to argue this so badly because I hate
Girl, go on and argue with
because
me.
because I hate absolutes.
Yeah,
I
I get
just
it.
when there's an absolute, I just, that's a test question. If there's an absolute, it's no, it's wrong because there's an absolute there. But so when
Yeah,
you say always, there's no room. It
yeah.
always happens.
But this
You've got
isn't,
to explain this to me.
yeah, well, this is not something that's new. I mean, even those among us who are familiar with the Christian Bible are familiar with
Mm-hmm.
the biblical verse, "And the truth shall set you free." So
Mm-hmm.
even that knowing is very old. That the truth always feels light. It always feels light, and but truth doesn't always feel good. That's the other piece.
That's the piece. And you also talk about it's not pain free.
That's exactly right. Truth is not pain free,
Mm-hmm.
because often the very things that you care most about are the things that you experience the most pain around. So caring and pain often go hand in hand, but that doesn't make it suffering. That doesn't make it heavy, right? So when someone, let's say someone has a thought of their child hasn't come home and it's past midnight, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
starting to think, what if their child is held up in or is in a ditch,
Abducted.
right? Right?
Okay.
And then you ask them, well, does that thought feel light or heavy? And it feels
Hmm.
heavy in part because uh, uh, it doesn't reflect reality.
But what if they are in a ditch, Tom?
Well, but if you knew they were in a ditch, you wouldn't have the preface of what if they are. It's the what if they are. Remember, that is the ego projecting into the future. What if they are?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what's heavy. That's the suffering. But once you know that
You
they are,
act.
you act, you respond, right? Or I give the example of that couple who get the knock at the door. Their child had been missing for 6 months, and there's the state trooper who says to them, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we found your daughter, and we're sad to report that she's dead. That while there's this great sadness around it, many people describe the relief in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just knowing. But there isn't joy in the knowing, but
Right.
there isn't a heaviness. It's a relief, they often will describe.
I see that a lot in clinical settings, Tom, in the sense where a diagnosis is being given that is probably a diagnosis of which somebody is going to die from.
Mm, mm,
One of my many different jobs as a nurse, I worked as a hospice nurse for some point in time. I worked hospice at some point, excuse me, and when a person has and then just working in a hospital setting, doctor's office settings as well, when a person has suffered or had all these different symptoms, yet there was never the symptom was never fully identified, or the source of the symptom was never fully identified. Once they're told, hey, the reason you're experiencing these things is because you have, and you speak it, whatever it is, cancer, some neurological disorder, something, there's a relief. There's
mm.
always a relief in the sense that now I know. Now I know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I That seems to be very, very common, right? And maybe you've had this experience. I've not personally. I worked in a nursing home as well. I understand that children, by and large, are much more accepting of their death than adults. That there is this kind of just real acceptance
Mm-hmm.
of it that is uh, uh, in part, I think, due to the lack of an ego having been solidified,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a lack of an ego that will argue with reality.
Mm-hmm. I'm more inclined to think that it has to do just medical training, right? Is that they don't have they don't have a developed prefrontal cortex. They haven't learned to start connecting the dots and seeing that kind of thing. And children feel like as though they're immortal, and death. What does death mean to a child? May be very difficult, a concept for them even to grasp. And in that, there's a gift from the universe, in the sense that that child's not going to go through the same um, narrative in their mind as a middle-aged person, or someone in their early adult years, where they have
Yeah.
so much still ahead of them and such. It's what I get stuck on is heavy and light. How do you define that? When something's heavy, is there a physical heaviness that you feel?
Yeah. I've never had anybody say that they can't define it.
Mm-hmm.
When I ask them simply, does that thought
Mm-hmm.
feel light or heavy? They know that it feels heavy.
Mm-hmm.
They go straight to the heavy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've never had a client who I thought was, who I anticipated would say heavy thought that said it was a light thought,
Okay. Okay.
right?
So it's a
That's an,
it's a it's a just that you just know.
you just know, yes, that there is there. I think there is a felt knowing. There
Mm-hmm.
is a dare I, for the sake of sounding somewhat woo woo, I think there is a sense of inner wisdom that they're tapping into,
Mm-hmm.
right? But so many of us ignore that wisdom, or just haven't been exposed to how to best understand that inner wisdom, because
Mm-hmm.
we get so seduced by the ego, right? The ego is the one telling us that something is so terrible or unjust or unright, it's not right, or what have you, and that when we sit with it, those are heavy thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But because our ego says it, we assume that it must be true. But when we look at it, and when you're with a therapist such as myself, who's able to guide you through the exploration, you begin to
Mm-hmm.
see the cracks, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
story, and have an opportunity to actually get into alignment with reality. Reality is always kinder. Reality is always kinder than the story our minds tell us about whatever future calamity might happen.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. So
Or
then,
even reality is, I'll just say this, reality is also kinder than our past, right? So I'll have clients, even had a client today who talked about their history of sexual trauma, right? And how basically, the story their mind was telling them was that they were broken from their sexual trauma, right? Well, if I look at reality, the reality is that they are here in this moment. And if they're here with me in this moment, then that means that they have survived everything that's ever happened to them. Well, I don't think a survivor is broken.
right.
So they had to have made every decision that they've ever made in their life must have been the right decision, because they're here in this moment, which is the only moment that exists. They're here in this moment. There's not an alternative universe that they could be in. They're here. And so when we can look at reality more clearly, and we're all, dare I say, we're all challenged in looking and seeing reality clearly, including me, we can
Mm-hmm.
only see reality through the lens of our own domestication. And some of us have, dare I say, very, very clouded lenses,
Mm-hmm.
and some of us have clearer lenses, but our lenses are still not reality. They are the thing through which we view reality.
Oh You see that a lot. You see that I see that a lot in when a person has come to a place in their life that they are seeking services, seeking help, they they are distraught with their reality, with what they perceive as their reality. It's the rare person that shows up and says, "I'm doing great. Just thought I'd come by." Like that never
Right.
happens, right?
For sure. For sure.
So how do you let go of the ego, Tom? How does one, you can you if you're so much in the what ifs and the shoulds and there's so much of this chatter and you're having this rigidity or this fatalistic thinking, how does one even get out of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number of ways of doing it. One is, but they what they all have in common is
Uh-huh.
that they all bring you back into presence. So earlier I talked about how the ego cannot exist in the present moment. So when you're fully in the present moment, there is no mind chatter, there is no ego that's present. And so there are a number of strategies to bring yourself into presence. One of those I mentioned earlier is walking through the woods, being out in nature, petting a dog, listening to good music, exercise, yoga, for example, all kinds of different ways of
Mm-hmm.
coming into presence. But there are also psychological ways, such as in the book I talk about Byron Katie's four questions and their turnaround, which I would love. I hope in one episode we could just do the work. I think that could be a episode in and of itself for people to get a sense of
Mm-hmm.
what does Byron Katie's work look like in real application. But again, what is that cognitive process
Mm-hmm.
that Byron Katie describes is just another way to pull you into the present moment, so that you can differentiate or separate the observer
Mm-hmm.
versus experience.
Mm-hmm.
That you are that which is able to observe your experience. You are not your experience.
I think that's a great idea, Tom. In fact, I think that I will I will I will study on that and come up with something that it may be real or not real.
Well, always best to go with something that is a stressful
Mm-hmm.
thought.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have stressful thoughts. I have stressful thoughts. The difference, I hope, is that the more you are aware of how your mind works,
Mm-hmm.
the less time you will spend in that space of suffering. And again, I still find myself suffering at times. My hope, though, is that over my adult life, I just spend less time in the state of
Yeah,
suffering.
yeah, yeah. When you just talk about being in the present and just clearing your mind of chatter, that is that is really hard.
Really hard.
It's not something you can just will yourself to do. It really is it's a meditative practice, and it is. I mean, if if folks learned how to do that early in their life, and it was just part of our natural culture, we wouldn't have a job, Tom. There'd be no need
Right.
for us.
That's true. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing. A lot of people have such fascination, a fixation on their mind chatter that um, they think it's the only way to exist. But to the best of our knowledge, there is no other species in the universe that has mind chatter, and yet the universe operates perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
The universe has operated perfectly fine for billions of years without mind chatter. So the in fact, this is a little bit academic. The uh, the concept of mind chatter is only about 2 to 3,000 years old. That prior to uh, uh, our transition as a polytheistic species to a monotheistic species, we didn't have mind chatter. There was no internal voice. And you see it similarly to kids. You know, when kids start reading, they
Mm-hmm.
read out loud. They don't
Mm-hmm.
have mind chatter. It is that internalizing that external
Mm-hmm.
voice that creates the sensation of mind chatter. And then once they've created that internal sensation of mind chatter, then
Mm-hmm.
that mind chatter that's inside tends to be a reflection of voices that they've heard outside. So judgments, love, whatever is the loving messages, not loving messages, become then the tape that follows that child throughout the rest of their life. And those who are psychologically resilient are those who are able to not take their mind chatter so seriously, especially if it's the kind that is
Mm-hmm.
critical.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I I can remember when I started. I don't. It wasn't like a particular event, but I remember like my parents saying, "What does your inside voice say? What is your voice in your head telling you?"
Mm.
You know, when
Mm.
I don't remember even the context. All I remember is that my parents were questioning me about something, and it was, "What do you? What's inside your head? What are you thinking inside?" And that was like an awareness of, "Oh, there's something inside there." Of course, it was their words, their voices, their direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
So the take home is, parents, you have you can really mess up your kids if you're not careful.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Um,
Oh,
we'll edit this piece out, but just to let you know, your video has stopped working.
I don't know
And
why.
on my side, it says uh, live video will return when their internet improves. Oh, there it is.
Okay,
Um,
all right. Well, I think it's very interesting. The whole thing is incredibly interesting to me, and as we're going through this, I think it would great our next episode. Let's make sure. Let's make that happen. Let's do the letting go of the ego and go through the work. The work, by the way, as you already had mentioned it, Byron Katie's, there is a website, right? There's a website, thework.com.
thework.com. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you people can go there and look at the little tests and such that we're talking about. It in As I was reading this in the book and talking about the just kind of basically challenging those beliefs that you're having, it reminds me so much of cognitive behavioral therapy, and
Sure.
takes me right to Dr. Ellis, and really just makes me think about in my own clinical practice, challenging, and how folks who have this internal dialogue or have this mind chatter that can be so destructive, they um, they almost realize the absurdity of what they're saying and their belief, and as they shine a light, as we shine a light on that in session, they they just kind of have that aha moment. I'm sure
Yeah,
you've probably experienced that aha moment with people as
that's right.
well.
That's right. That's right. Um, what I would encourage listeners to do is visit thework.com and download the free worksheet called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, and you can follow along with us uh, next episode as we walk through the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, and we'll have Frances also come to the episode having completed her copy of the Judge Her Neighbor worksheet as we showcase how the work is done.
That is so funny. Judge your neighbor.
Judge your neighbor.
Like we don't already do it. That we have to have a worksheet.
Ask 4 questions, write it down, and then there are the turnarounds.
All right, we sure will. I've enjoyed this so much, Tom. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today and kind of helping me understand a little bit more about the concepts that you're identifying in the book and with the mind chatter and then just the information. I learned about strap-on dildos today, so I appreciate that as well.
Well, you know, it's such a pleasure that I get to call you friend, and I'm enjoying this journey with you.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Bye now. And that wraps up another episode of Making Nice with Naughty. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of intimacy for the rule-following and organized.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found our discussions helpful or intriguing, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the podcast. Plus, it lets us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes.
Have questions or you want to share your experiences? Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Links on the description.
And for more in-depth insights, be sure to grab a copy of my book, Making Nice with Naughty, available on Amazon and Audible for the audiobook.
Thank you again for spending time with us. Remember, you can be both organized and adventurous in matters of the heart.
Until next time, keep making nice with Naughty. To renew your passion
and ignite your desires.